The morning was bitter, the kind of cold that seeped into bones and lingered like grief. Charles Wexler pulled his coat tighter as he stepped out of his car, the gravel crunching under his polished shoes. The cemetery was empty, save for the rustling of dead leaves and the distant caw of a crow. He didn't need directions anymore. His feet carried him to the same spot every time, as if drawn by an invisible thread. Eleanor's grave stood beneath an old oak tree, its branches bare and skeletal against the gray sky. A year had passed since her death, but the pain was still fresh, a wound that refused to scab over. He knelt, brushing his fingers over the engraved dates on the marble headstone. "I miss you," he whispered, the words swallowed by the wind. Then a movement caught his eye. A small figure stood a few graves away, barely taller than the headstones. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow, maybe a stray dog, but as he squinted, the shape resolved into a child. A little girl, drowning in an oversized black sweater, her arms cradling two tiny bundles wrapped in a frayed blanket. She wasn't crying, wasn't moving, just staring at Eleanor's grave with an intensity that made Charles's chest tighten. Who was she? And why was she here, alone with what looked like infants? Curiosity overpowered his usual restraint. He stood slowly, not wanting to startle her, and took a step closer. The girl didn't react. Up close, he could see her cheeks were smudged with dirt, her knuckles red from the cold. The bundles in her arms shifted slightly. Newborns, their faces barely visible under the folds of fabric. "Hello," Charles said softly. The girl's eyes flicked to him, wide and wary, but she didn't run. There was something unsettling about her stillness, the way she held his gaze like an adult. "Are you waiting for someone?" He tried again. The girl glanced back at Eleanor's grave, then at him. "You're him," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "The one she talked about." Charles froze. "She?" The girl nodded toward the headstone. "The kind lady. Eleanor." A shiver ran down Charles's spine. How did this child know his wife's name? Before he could ask, the girl continued. "She used to bring us food. Blankets, too. Before she got too sick." Charles's breath hitched. Eleanor had never mentioned this. But then again, in those last months there had been so much she hadn't told him. Things she'd hidden to protect him, he assumed. The girl shifted the twins in her arms, and one let out a tiny whimper. "We don't have anywhere to sleep today," she said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "But I remembered this place. She always smiled at us here." Charles's throat tightened. He opened his mouth to offer help, but the girl leaned closer suddenly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She told me something. Before she left." Charles bent down, his heart pounding. The girl's next words shattered him. She said, "If anything happened to her, you'd help us, that you'd keep us safe." For a moment, the world tilted. Charles swayed, his knees hitting the damp grass. Eleanor had sent this girl to him. But why? Who were these children? And what had his wife been involved in? The questions swarmed, but one thing was certain. He couldn't leave them here. Not now. Not after what the girl had just said. He reached out, hand trembling. "Come with me," he said. The girl studied him for a long moment, then nodded. As Charles led them to his car, he glanced back at Eleanor's grave. The wind howled through the trees, sounding almost like a whisper. "Keep them safe." The drive back to Charles's estate was silent, the weight of the girl's words pressing down on him like a storm cloud. Lily, she had finally told him her name, sat stiffly in the back seat, her arms never loosening their grip around the twins. Every so often, Charles caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, her eyes darting between the passing trees and the road ahead, as if expecting something, or someone, to appear. The twins, swaddled in the threadbare blanket, slept soundly, their tiny faces peaceful despite the uncertainty of their circumstances. Charles's mind raced. Who were these children? Why had Eleanor known them? And what had she meant by, "You'd keep us safe"? The questions gnawed at him, but he forced himself to focus on the immediate need: shelter, warmth, food. The girl's hollow cheeks and the way her fingers trembled told him she hadn't eaten properly in days. When the iron gates of his mansion loomed ahead, Lily's breath hitched. She pressed herself deeper into the seat, her knuckles whitening, around the blanket. "You live here?" she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and fear. Charles nodded, but before he could reassure her, she added, "She said it was big. She said you had a library with a secret door." His hands froze on the steering wheel. Eleanor had told her about the house. That detail, the hidden door, behind the bookshelf, was something only a handful of people knew. A cold prickle ran down his spine. How much had Eleanor shared with this child? And why? Inside, the staff reacted with barely concealed shock as Charles ushered the ragged trio into the grand foyer. Mrs. Holloway, his head of housekeeping, recovered first, her maternal instincts overriding her professionalism. She clucked her tongue at the sight of Lily's worn shoes and the twins' thin layers, immediately ordering warm baths and fresh clothes. Lily, however, resisted. Her eyes darted around the opulent hall, lingering on the portraits, the chandelier, the sweeping staircase, as if searching for something, or someone. Charles knelt beside her. "You're safe here," he said gently. She met his gaze, her voice barely audible. "She said you'd say that." That night, after the children had been fed and settled into one of the guest suites, Lily refusing to let the twins out of her sight, Charles retreated to his study. His hands shook as he poured himself a drink, the ice clinking violently against the glass. He needed answers. Pulling out his phone, he dialed his head of security, Marcus. "I need you to look into something," he said, his voice low. "A child, around 8 years old, name's Lily, no last name, and twins, newborns. Check hospitals, shelters, missing persons reports." Quietly. Hanging up, he stared at the fireplace, the flames casting long shadows. Eleanor had been hiding something big, and now it had found its way to his doorstep. He didn't realize he'd fallen asleep until a sound jolted him awake, soft creak, like a door opening. Blinking, he turned toward the noise. There, in the dim light, stood Lily. She was alone, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. "I couldn't sleep," she murmured. Charles rubbed his eyes. "Where are the twins?" "Mrs. Holloway is watching them," she said, but her gaze was fixed on the grand piano in the corner. Without a word, she walked toward it, her fingers brushing the polished wood. Then, to Charles's shock, she knelt and reached beneath it, her small arm disappearing into the shadowed space. A moment later, she pulled out a small, ornate box, one Charles recognized instantly. Eleanor's keepsake box, the one he hadn't been able to find after her death. His breath caught. "How did you know that was there?" Lily didn't answer. Instead, she opened the box, revealing a stack of letters tied with a ribbon. On top was a single sheet, Eleanor's elegant handwriting unmistakable. Lily handed it to him. His hands trembled as he read, "Charles, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Lily has found you. Trust her. Protect them. The twins are in danger. They're not just any children. They're proof, and there are people who will kill to keep their secrets buried." The room spun. Proof of what? What had Eleanor stumbled into? Before he could ask, Lily spoke again, her voice eerily calm. "She said you'd have questions, but we don't have much time. They're already looking for us." The words on the letter blurred as Charles read them again, his mind struggling to reconcile the reality in front of him with the life he thought he knew. Eleanor had left him a message from beyond the grave, delivered by a child who seemed to carry secrets too heavy for her small shoulders. Lily stood perfectly still, watching him with eyes that held none of the innocence of childhood, only a quiet, unsettling awareness. The air in the study grew thick, the crackling fire the only sound as Charles tried to steady his breathing. "Who is looking for you?" he asked, his voice rough with a mix of fear and urgency. Lily's gaze flickered toward the window, where the estate's sprawling gardens lay shrouded in darkness. "The men in black cars," she whispered. "The ones who took Mama away." A chill ran through Charles. He had assumed the twins were Lily's siblings, but now he realized he had never asked who their mother was, or what had happened to her. He set the letter down carefully, his fingers lingering on Eleanor's handwriting as if he could somehow draw her presence from the ink. "Lily," he said slowly, "you need to tell me everything. Who is your mother? How did you know Eleanor? And why are those men after the twins?" The girl hesitated, her small hands clutching the edge of the piano bench. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked uncertain, as if weighing how much to reveal. Finally, she took a deep breath. "Mama worked in a big building with lots of papers. She came home scared one night and said she saw something she wasn't supposed to. Then the men came. They told her she was imagining things, but she wasn't." Lily's voice wavered, her composure cracking. "She hid me and the twins before they took her. She said to find Eleanor, that she was the only one who could help." Charles's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about a few homeless children. It was about something far darker, something Eleanor had discovered during her final days. He thought back to her last months, the way she'd often stayed out late, claiming she had meetings when he knew her treatments left her exhausted. The time, he'd assumed she was trying to spare him the pain of watching her deteriorate. But now he wondered if she had been involved in something dangerous. "Did Eleanor ever tell you what your mother saw?" he pressed. Lily shook her head. "No, but she said the twins were special, that their blood could hurt bad people." The cryptic statement sent a jolt through him. Blood? What did that mean? Before he could ask, a sharp knock at the study door made them both jump. Mrs. Holloway's voice came through, tense. "Mr. Wexler, Marcus is here. He says it's urgent." Charles exchanged a glance with Lily. "Hide the box," he murmured. She quickly slid it back under the piano just as the door opened. Marcus, his usually composed face tight with unease, stepped inside. "Sir, we have a problem," he said, his voice low. "I ran Lily's name through the system. There's no record of her, no birth certificate, no school records, nothing. But I did find something else." He handed Charles a tablet. On the screen was a grainy security feed from a downtown hospital. The timestamp was 3 months ago, weeks after Eleanor's death. The footage showed a woman in scrubs fleeing through a back exit, 2 newborns clutched to her chest. The caption beneath the image made Charles's blood run cold. "Wanted for questioning in connection with the theft of classified genetic material." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. That woman, Lily's mother, was a researcher at Gentech Laboratories, the same company your wife's foundation was investigating before she passed. The pieces slammed together in Charles's mind. Eleanor's charity had been looking into unethical medical trials, but she'd never mentioned Gentech by name. If Lily's mother had stolen something from them, something tied to the twins, it would explain why they were being hunted. Charles's grip tightened on the tablet. "We need to secure the house," he said sharply. "Now, and pull every file we have on Gentech." Marcus nodded and turned to leave, but Lily's sudden gasp stopped him. She was staring out the window, her face pale. "Charles," she whispered. Outside, beyond the gated driveway, 2 black SUVs had pulled up, their headlights cutting through the night like knives. Charles moved instantly, his body reacting before his mind could fully process the threat. He grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her away from the window, his pulse roaring in his ears as he barked orders at Marcus. "Lock down the estate. Activate the security protocols. No one gets in." Marcus didn't hesitate, already speaking into his earpiece as he strode out, his voice sharp with urgency. Charles turned to Lily, her small fingers icy in his grip. "Listen." "To me? Carefully," he said, crouching to her level. "I need you to take the twins and go to the panic room. It's hidden behind the bookshelf in the library, just like Eleanor told you. Do not come out until I come for you. Do you understand?" Lily nodded, her eyes wide but eerily calm, as if she had expected this moment. "They'll try to trick you," she whispered. "They'll say they're police or doctors, but they're not." The certainty in her voice sent a fresh wave of dread through him. How many times had she and her mother run before? How close had those men gotten? He didn't have time to ask. The distant crunch of gravel under tires spurred him into action. Charles guided Lily to the door, calling for Mrs. Holloway as he did. The older woman appeared instantly, her face tight with fear but her hands steady as she took Lily from him. "Take them to the panic room," Charles ordered. "Now." Mrs. Holloway didn't argue, ushering Lily away just as the first pounding knock echoed through the mansion's grand foyer. Charles took a steadying breath, forcing his expression into one of bored irritation as he walked toward the entrance. He could see shadows through the frosted glass. 3, maybe 4 men. He swung the door open before they could knock again, his voice dripping with the practiced arrogance of a man used to dismissing nuisances. "Can I help you?" The man on the doorstep wore a tailored suit, his smile polished but his eyes cold. "Mr. Wexler, Detective Cole, NYPD." He flashed a badge too quickly for Charles to scrutinize. "We're following up on a missing persons case. We have reason to believe a child, matching the description of a runaway, might be on your property." Charles arched a brow, leaning against the doorframe. "And what description would that be?" The detective's smile didn't waver. 8-year-old female, brown hair, possibly accompanied by infants. "Her mother is wanted for questioning in a federal investigation," Charles scoffed, crossing his arms. "You've got the wrong house. I don't know what you're talking about." The detective's gaze flicked past him, scanning the foyer. "We'd appreciate it if you'd let us take a look around. It would only take a moment." The words were polite, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. A threat wrapped in bureaucracy. Charles didn't move. "Do you have a warrant?" The detective's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "We were hoping to avoid the formalities, given your standing in the community." Charles laughed, sharp and humorless. "Then I suggest you come. Back with one." For a heartbeat, the air between them crackled with tension. Then the detective nodded, stepping back. "Of course, we'll be in touch." He turned, signaling to the others, and they retreated to their vehicles. Charles shut the door slowly, waiting until he heard the engines fade before sagging against the wood. They weren't done. They'd be back, with a warrant, with reinforcements, with whatever authority they could fabricate. He needed to move fast. He found Marcus in the security room, eyes glued to the monitors. "They're not leaving," Marcus muttered, pointing to the feed. The SUVs had stopped just beyond the gate, their headlights off but engines idling. "They're waiting for something." Charles clenched his fists. "How long until we can get the kids out unnoticed?" Marcus shook his head. "Not with them watching. But there's another way." He pulled up a blueprint of the estate, pointing to the old servants' tunnel beneath the gardens. "It leads to the boathouse. From there, we can take the river." Charles nodded. "Get them ready. We go in 10. As Marcus left, Charles pulled out the letter again, Eleanor's words burning in his mind. "They're proof." Proof of what? Genetic experiments? Illegal adoptions? Whatever it was, it had gotten Lily's mother taken and Eleanor killed. And now it was in his house. He reached for his phone, dialing the only person he trusted with something this dangerous. His brother, Daniel, a journalist who'd spent years digging into corporate corruption. The line connected after one ring. "Charlie, you okay?" Daniel's voice was groggy with sleep. "No," Charles said quietly. "I need your help, and I need you to listen carefully." The servants' tunnel was damp and narrow, the air thick with the scent of earth and mildew as Charles led the way, his flashlight cutting a shaky path through the darkness. Lily walked beside him, her small hand gripping his sleeve, while Mrs. Holloway followed close behind, cradling one of the twins against her chest, the other swaddled tightly in a sling across Lily's shoulders. The faint sound of the men outside, muffled voices, the occasional crackle of a radio, echoed through the walls, a constant reminder of how little time they had. Charles's mind raced as they moved, every creak of the old wooden beams making his breath hitch. He had no way of knowing if the tunnel had been compromised, if the men outside had already discovered this escape route and were waiting for them, at the other end. But staying wasn't an option. Not when the detective's eyes had lingered too long on the library doors, not when Lily had whispered that these men had taken her mother in the exact same way. Polite questions first, force, when that failed. The tunnel ended at a rusted metal door, its hinges groaning in protest as Charles pushed it open, revealing the boathouse beyond. Moonlight spilled through the broken slats of the roof, illuminating the sleek motorboat tied to the dock. Marcus was already there, his silhouette tense as he checked the fuel gauge. "We've got maybe an hour before they realize you're gone," he muttered, helping Mrs. Holloway and the twins into the boat. Charles lifted Lily onto the deck, her arms tightening around his neck for a brief moment before she let go. "Will they follow us?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Charles hesitated, then nodded. "Probably, but we'll be ready." The engine roared to life, the sound too loud in the quiet night, and Charles didn't wait. He shoved off from the dock, steering the boat into the dark currents of the river. Behind them, the estate shrank into the distance, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. Mrs. Holloway clutched the twins closer, her face pale. "Where are we going?" she asked. Charles adjusted their course, his jaw set. "Somewhere they won't expect." He didn't elaborate, but his grip on the wheel tightened. He'd texted Daniel an address, an old safe house upstate, one Eleanor had used years ago for her charity's at-risk cases. If anyone could unravel the truth about Gentech and the twins, it was his brother. But first, they had to get there alive. Lily sat silently at the bow, her gaze fixed on the water. After a long moment, she spoke without turning. "Eleanor said, you'd know what to do." Charles exhaled sharply. "I wish I did." The admission tasted bitter. For all his wealth and power, he was floundering, chasing ghosts and half-truths while children's lives hung in the balance. Lily finally looked at him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "She also said you'd doubt yourself, but that you'd be brave when it mattered." The words hit him like a physical blow. How many conversations had Eleanor had with this child? How much had she known or suspected about what would happen after her death? A sudden noise cut through his thoughts, the distant whine of another engine growing louder. Charles twisted in his seat, his stomach dropping as a spotlight flared across the water behind them. A speedboat, sleek and black, was gaining fast. "Marcus!" Charles barked. His head of security was already moving, pulling a handgun from his waistband. "Get down!" Mrs. Holloway yanked Lily to the floor, shielding the twins with her body as the first gunshot rang out, the bullet pinging off the metal railing. Charles wrenched the wheel hard to the left, the boat lurching violently as they swerved into a narrow tributary, overhanging branches scraping the roof. The pursuing boat followed, its spotlight blinding. Another shot, this one closer. Marcus returned fire, his aim steady despite the rocking of the boat. There was a shout, then a splash, as one of their pursuers went overboard. But the second boat kept coming. Charles's hands were slick with sweat, his heart hammering as he pushed the engine harder. They couldn't outrun them forever. He needed a plan, a distraction. His eyes darted to the upcoming bend in the river where the water narrowed dangerously, between two jagged rock faces. A reckless idea formed. "Hold on," he yelled, cutting the engine abruptly. The boat lurched, drifting sideways with the current, right into the path of the oncoming speedboat. The men shouted, swerving too late. Their hull clipped the rocks with a deafening crunch, the impact sending up a spray of water and splintered fiberglass. Charles didn't wait to see if they'd recover. He gunned the engine again, their boat shooting forward into the safety of the shadows. For now, they were safe. But the cost of this fight was only beginning. Somewhere ahead, Daniel would be waiting with answers. And Charles would have to face the truth about Eleanor, about the twins, and about the empire of secrets that had already taken too much from them. The safe house was an unassuming cabin nestled deep in the woods, its weathered wooden exterior blending seamlessly into the surrounding forest. As the boat bumped against the rickety dock, Charles scanned the tree line, his muscles coiled tight, half expecting armed men to come bursting through the undergrowth at any moment. But the only movement was the flutter of leaves in the wind and the distant call of an owl. Lily stirred beside him, her small frame shivering despite the thick blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The twins, mercifully, had slept through the chaos on the river, their tiny faces peaceful in Mrs. Holloway's arms. Marcus jumped onto the dock first, gun drawn as he checked the perimeter, his silhouette tense in the moonlight. After a tense moment, he gave a sharp nod. "Clear," he muttered, though the tightness in his voice betrayed his unease. Charles helped Lily and Mrs. Holloway onto the dock, his eyes never leaving the shadows. The cabin's front door creaked open before they reached it, and Daniel stepped out, his usual disheveled appearance even more pronounced under the dim porch light. Dark circles bruised his eyes, and his stubble had grown into a rough beard, but his grip was firm as he pulled Charles into a quick, wordless hug. "You look like hell," Daniel said, his attempt at humor falling flat. Charles didn't smile. "We need to talk. Inside." The cabin's interior was sparse but clean, the scent of pine and old books lingering in the air. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Daniel had already set up a makeshift workstation on the kitchen table. Laptops, files, and a sprawling network of handwritten notes that made Charles's stomach twist. He recognized Eleanor's handwriting mixed in with Daniel's chaotic scrawl. Lily hovered near the fireplace, her gaze darting between the adults, while Mrs. Holloway settled into an armchair with the twins, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted their blankets. Daniel wasted no time. He grabbed a file and thrust it at Charles. "Gentech isn't just some shady lab. They're a front for something bigger. Eleanor was onto them months before she died. She thought they were engineering children, Charles. Custom DNA. The twins might be part of that." Charles's blood turned to ice. He flipped open the file, his eyes skimming over medical reports, genetic sequences, and a series of grainy photos showing pregnant women being ushered into unmarked vans. At the bottom of the stack was a familiar name, Lily's mother, Dr. Elena Vasquez, listed as a lead researcher on a project called Project Phoenix. A sticky note in Eleanor's handwriting was stuck to the page. "They're using the babies as carriers. The perfect crime. No one questions a missing orphan." Charles's hands shook. "Where is Elena now?" Daniel's expression darkened. "Vanished. Officially, she's a fugitive. Gentech claims she stole proprietary research. But Eleanor believed. They took her because she tried to blow the whistle." A soft sound made them both turn. Lily stood frozen by the fireplace, her face pale. "They hurt Mama," she whispered. "They made her scream." The raw pain in her voice shattered Charles's composure. He crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling in front of her. "Lily, did you see what happened?" She nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "They put needles in the babies first. Mama tried to stop them. Then they took her away." The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The twins weren't just targets. They were evidence, living proof of whatever Gentech had created, and Lily had witnessed it all. Charles looked at Daniel, his voice low and urgent. "We need to expose this. Now." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple. Gentek's tied to half. The politicians in the state. We go public without irrefutable proof, we'll be discredited, or worse." He gestured to the twins. "But their DNA could be the smoking gun. If we can get it analyzed by someone outside Gentek's reach." A sudden knock at the door silenced them. Everyone froze. Marcus drew his gun, motioning for them to stay back as he crept toward the door. Charles pulled Lily behind him, his pulse roaring in his ears. The knock came again, 3 sharp raps followed by 2 softer ones. Daniel's shoulders slumped in relief. "It's okay, it's my contact." He hurried to the door and opened it, revealing a wiry woman in a lab coat, her sharp eyes scanning the room before landing on the twins. "I'm Dr. Chen," she said briskly. "I worked with Elena. Where are the samples?" Charles hesitated. "How? Do we know? We can trust you." Dr. Chen didn't flinch. She pulled a folded photo from her pocket and handed it to him. It showed her and Elena, arms around each other, grinning in front of a birthday cake. Beneath it, Elena had written, "If anything happens, find Lena. She'll keep them safe." Charles met Daniel's gaze, then nodded. As Dr. Chen moved toward the twins, Lily suddenly darted forward, blocking her path. "No needles," she said fiercely. Dr. Chen knelt, her voice gentle. "No needles. Just a quick swab. I promise." Charles watched as the doctor worked, his mind racing. They were running out of time. Gentek would realize their men had failed. They'd send more. And this time, they wouldn't stop until the twins, and everyone protecting them, were silenced. He grabbed Daniel's arm. "We need a plan. A real one." Daniel's jaw set. "First, we get the proof. Then we hit them where it hurts." Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows like a warning. The storm was coming, and Charles would be ready. The morning dawned gray and heavy with the threat of rain, the kind of weather that mirrored the tension coiled in Charles's chest as he stood by the cabin's window, watching the trees sway in the wind. Dr. Chen had worked through the night, her laptop humming as she cross-referenced the twins' DNA with the stolen Gentek files, her expression growing grimmer with each passing hour. Lily had finally fallen asleep on the couch, her small hand curled around the edge of the blanket covering the twins, as if, even in rest, she couldn't bear to let them out of her reach. Mrs. Holloway dozed in the armchair, her face lined with exhaustion, while Marcus kept watch at the door, his gun within easy reach. Daniel paced near the fireplace, his fingers tapping restlessly against his thigh as he waited for Dr. Chen's verdict. The air in the cabin was thick with unspoken fear, the kind that came from knowing the enemy wasn't just powerful, but ruthless enough to kill children to protect their secrets. Dr. Chen's sharp inhale snapped everyone to attention. She turned, the laptop toward Charles, her voice tight with fury. "It's worse than we thought. The twins aren't just genetically altered, they're designed to carry a synthetic pathogen, one that's undetectable in their blood but lethal if extracted, and weaponized. Gentek wasn't just experimenting on them. They were turning them into living bioweapons." The words landed like a physical blow. Charles's vision swam as he stared at the screen, the complex strands of DNA twisting like a grotesque mockery of life. Eleanor had died for this. Elena had been taken for this. And Lily, God, Lily had watched it all, his hands clenched into fists. Who were they planning to sell this to? Dr. Chen's mouth flattened into a thin line. The highest bidder, governments, terror cells. It doesn't matter to Gentek. The twins are just the first of many. A soft whimper came from the couch. Lily was awake, her wide eyes fixed on Charles, her face pale with understanding. She'd heard everything. Charles crossed to her in 2 strides, kneeling beside her. "We're going to stop them," he said fiercely. Lily's lower lip trembled. "But they're strong." "So are we," Daniel cut in. his voice uncharacteristically gentle. He crouched next to Charles, meeting Lily's gaze. Your mama was brave. Eleanor was brave. Now it's our turn. Lily hesitated, then reached into the pocket of her sweater, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. Mama hid this in my shoe, she whispered. She said to give it to someone who could help. Charles smoothed out the paper, a list of names, dates, and coordinates. At the bottom, scrawled in Elena's hurried handwriting, Lab 7. Proof is in the vents. Daniel snatched the paper, his eyes blazing. This is it. This is what we need. He turned to Dr. Chen. How fast can you get this to your contacts at the WHO? She was already packing her bag. If I leave now, 12 hours, but Gentech will know the second I start pinging their servers. Charles stood. Then we'll make sure they're too busy to notice. He grabbed his phone, dialing a number he hadn't used in years, one that connected him to a man who owed him a favor. The line picked up on the first ring. Wexler, you're alive. The voice on the other end was rough with amusement. Charles didn't smile. I need a distraction, something big, and I need it in 2 hours. There was a pause, then a chuckle. You're lucky I like fireworks. The plan came together in a flurry of movement. Daniel and Dr. Chen would take the evidence to the World Health Organization, leveraging their global reach to bypass Gentech's political shields. Marcus would stay with Mrs. Holloway and the children, moving them to a secondary safe house. And Charles would go to Lab 7. If there was more proof to be found, he'd burn the place down to get it. As they prepared to leave, Lily caught Charles's sleeve. You'll come back, right? Her voice was small, but her eyes held, the same steel he'd seen in Eleanor's. Charles cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a smudge of dirt. I promise. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall. 3 hours later, the skies over Gentech's headquarters erupted in chaos. A series of malfunctions triggered explosions in empty labs, flooding the security feeds with false alarms. By the time anyone realized Lab 7 was the real target, Charles was already inside, his phone streaming every second of what he found. Rows of incubators holding more infants, files detailing shipments, and a single damning video of Gentech's CEO admitting to everything. He uploaded it all to Daniel's waiting servers just as the first guards burst in. The fallout was immediate. By dawn, Gentech's stock had collapsed. Arrest warrants were issued. The twins' DNA, and the dozens of other children like them, became the center of an international scandal. And Charles, standing on the steps of the courthouse with Lily's hand in his and the twins in his arms, finally understood Eleanor's last gift to him. She hadn't just sent him children to save. She'd sent him a reason to live. The reporters shouted questions, but Charles ignored them, bending down to whisper to Lily instead. What do you say we go home? Lily smiled for the first time since he'd met her, her fingers tightening around his. Okay, she said, and for the first time in a year, Charles believed it would be.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.